far beyond the known edges of the Virulent Empire, where the stars burned faint and the darkness seemed endless. A soft beeping sound broke the silence inside the monitoring room of Citadel Prime. Technician Varlo, usually half asleep during his late shift, jolted upright as the console flashed a strange crimson warning he had never seen before. His 3 hearts thudded heavily in his chest as he tapped the screen and watched the alert grow louder and more urgent. An unregistered ship had crossed into Imperial space. At first, Varlo thought it was a mistake. Maybe a merchant freighter with faulty ID codes or a drifting piece of wreckage still carrying old signal beacons. But as the ship drew closer, moving with deliberate precision, his gut told him this was something else entirely. He sent a high-priority message to Command Center without a second thought. Within minutes, the cold, vast hall of Citadel Prime's war room buzzed with activity. High Administrator Orcs entered, his silver robes flowing behind him like mist, his expression a mask of calm but his mind sharp and calculating. The Virulents had ruled this sector for millennia, and they knew every ship, every route, every possible threat, or so they thought. Sorix stood before the holographic map as it displayed the approaching vessel, its outline strange and unfamiliar. It didn't shimmer with sleek, organic curves like most galactic ships. It was harsh, angular, and old-fashioned, as if it had been built not with grace, but with determination. Sorix frowned, his advisors whispering in low, tense voices. Reports came flooding in. The ship's material scans were baffling. Basic alloys, primitive construction methods, no evidence of advanced energy shielding. Yet somehow, it was traveling at impossible speeds, slicing through deep space storms and cosmic radiation fields without slowing down. Even more unsettling, it ignored every standard communication attempt, instead broadcasting a steady, low-frequency signal that the translator struggled to decode. The only clue was a simple tag embedded in the transmission: humanity. Sorix tapped his clawed fingers against the table, remembering faint, dusty records about a species called human small, fragile creatures that had barely survived their own home planet's wrath, forgotten by most of the galaxy. They were supposed to be insignificant, trapped in their gravity well, too primitive to matter. And yet, here one was, flying directly toward the heart of the Empire without fear. As the unknown vessel continued its steady approach, alarm sounded across Citadel Prime. Fighters scrambled, defense grids powered up, and the citizens of the massive station were quietly herded into shelters under the guise of routine drills. Sorix watched all this unfold with a deepening sense of unease. Strength alone wouldn't be enough. This ship, this human ship, was different. It didn't act like an invasion force, nor did it seem suicidal. It moved with a kind of stubborn purpose, as if it knew exactly what it was doing and dared anyone to try stopping it. In the observation bay, Commander Taller stood at the massive glass viewport, watching the tiny glimmer of the incoming ship against the backdrop of the swirling blue gas clouds. His second-in-command approached, nervous. "Sir, orders?" Taller hesitated. They could shoot it down easily, overwhelm it with firepower. But something about its approach whispered caution. It wasn't posturing or threatening, it was announcing itself, not like a conqueror, but like a messenger. "Hold fire," Taller said finally, the words tasting strange in his mouth. Meanwhile, inside the strange vessel, Commander Lee Vance sat comfortably in her worn pilot seat, humming an old Earth tune as she adjusted the manual thrusters. Around her, the ship vibrated and groaned, a beast that should have been dead long ago, kept alive only by the stubborn care of its crew. Except there was no crew. Just her. Just Leah. Humanity's first ambassador to the stars, carrying the hopes of a reborn species determined to leave their mark not with armies, but with their presence. Leah knew what she was walking into. The Virulents would either welcome her with cautious respect or blast her ship into dust. But fear had never been part of her training. Earth had raised survivors, dreamers, fighters. If she had to be the first human to show the galaxy what they were made of, she would do it with a smile and a challenge in her eyes. As she adjusted her comms panel, she sent a direct, simple message toward Citadel Prime. A human voice, clear and proud, echoed across the alien systems, permission to dock and say hello. Back at the station, Solrix and his council stared at each other in stunned silence. No threats. No demands. Just a greeting. Suspicion coiled in Solrix's mind like a serpent. Was it a trick? A distraction? Or were these humans truly as reckless and bold as the ancient legends hinted? As the minutes ticked by, tension thickened like a storm about to break. Solrix realized that this was more than a simple encounter, it was a test. The Empire's response would shape the future. The unknown ship drifted ever closer, its every movement watched by millions. Soldiers stood at the ready. Scientists raced to decode every detail of the transmission. Citizens whispered and waited. In that endless moment between first contact and first decision, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The signal pulsed again, steady and unafraid, a heartbeat from a world long thought lost, now knocking on the door of an empire that had grown too comfortable. Humanity had come to the stars not with the roar of warships, but with the quiet defiance of explorers who had learned, the hard way, that survival meant facing the impossible with nothing but guts and grit. Solrix straightened, his decision hanging heavy in the charged air, knowing that the course of history might change with the next word he spoke. The docking bay of Citadel Prime, usually calm and orderly, was now a hive of nervous energy as engineers, guards, and officials scrambled to prepare for the unknown visitor. High Administrator Solrix stood behind the reinforced observation glass, watching the strange ship glide closer, its design rough yet determined, its thrusters pulsing with an old, almost forgotten kind of technology. The ship sent another message, short and simple, translated into the Varellan common tongue, permission to dock and say hello. It was such an innocent statement that it unsettled the council more than any threat would have. No one could understand why a ship so small, so primitive-looking, would dare to approach the greatest stronghold of the Empire without fear. Solrix's advisors whispered urgent recommendations, some pushing to destroy the ship immediately, others warning to proceed carefully, but Solrix silenced them all with a sharp glance. His instincts, honed over decades of ruling, told him this was not an ordinary event, and responding with violence too quickly might trigger consequences they could not predict. He knew enough about history to remember that true danger often came not from overwhelming power, but from unexpected defiance. As the ship finally docked with an old magnetic coupling system that hadn't been used in centuries, a low murmur spread through the command deck. No one had seen manual docking in a lifetime. All modern ships relied on automatic systems. The fact that this human pilot not only attempted but succeeded in such a maneuver sent a ripple of confusion through the Empire's finest minds. Solrix leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing as he observed the gangway extend from the docked ship, creaking under the unfamiliar weight and design. Moments later, a figure appeared, a human, female by the scans, wearing a simple, practical suit without weapons, without ceremonial flair, walking with a relaxed, confident stride that made even the veteran guards shift uneasily. Commander Leah Vance scanned the docking bay with a practiced eye, noting every weapon turret, every defensive position, every curious eye watching her every move. She smiled inwardly. She had expected fear or hostility, but not this deep, almost superstitious awe. It was as if her very presence was rewriting everything they thought they knew about humans. She knew the stories had painted Earthlings as lost, broken survivors barely clinging to life on a scarred planet. But no one out here knew what humanity had become in their centuries of isolation. Innovators, dreamers, warriors forged by hardship into something the galaxy was not ready for. She stopped at the checkpoint where an honor guard stood waiting, weapons lowered but ready, their polished armor gleaming under the artificial lights. A tall Varellan officer, his expression unreadable, gestured for her to follow without a word. Leah nodded easily and fell into step beside him, her boots echoing across the metallic floor. They moved through the winding corridors of Citadel Prime, past curious onlookers, past silent sentinels, deeper into the heart of the station where decisions were made and futures were shaped. Every eye that watched her seemed to carry the same question: why had a human come here, alone, without armies or fleets, without demands or fear? As they reached the Grand Council chamber, the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a high-ceilinged room adorned with easy grace she had shown at the dock, stopping only when she was a respectful distance from the council. She removed her helmet, revealing sharp eyes and a confident smile that seemed to challenge the room itself. Sorek studied her closely, noting how she carried herself not like a diplomat trained in delicate words, nor like a conqueror weighing her enemies, but like an explorer stepping onto new ground, ready for anything. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched taut, electric with expectation. Then Lee broke it, her voice steady, warm, and carrying a faint trace of amusement. "Commander Lee of Vance, Earth Expeditionary Force," she said simply, her words crisp in the still air. "I'm here to open dialogue, establish peaceful relations, and maybe learn a few things about your part of the galaxy." The words were easy, but the weight behind them was anything but. Sorek exchanged quick glances with his advisors, noting the barely hidden panic among them. The idea that a humanist species thought irrelevant would appear here not to beg or plead, but to offer friendship on equal terms was almost unthinkable. Some among the council still believed it was a trick, a distraction for a larger force hidden beyond their scanners. But Sorek, deep down, felt the dangerous truth: this was no trick. This was humanity's true arrival. He asked questions carefully, probing her intentions, her capabilities, her reasons for coming alone. Lee answered with honesty that was neither arrogant nor submissive, describing Earth's struggles, their rebuilding after centuries of catastrophe, their decision to avoid the mistakes that had destroyed so many civilizations before them. She spoke of a humanity reborn through hardship, one that had no desire to conquer but every desire to grow, to learn, to thrive among the stars. And yet, under her calm tone, there was an iron certainty that could not be missed: humanity would not be dominated, not be bullied, and certainly not be forgotten again. As the dialogue continued, subtle waves of unease rippled through the council. Every assumption they had made about humans crumbled with each word. They had expected desperation or ignorance. Instead, they found resilience, determination, and a spirit that no empire could easily contain. Sorek realized, with a sinking feeling, that the arrival of this lone ship might signal the beginning of a shift far larger than anyone here could yet understand. If one human could stand before them so calmly, so confidently, what would happen when more of them came? What would happen when humanity's explorers, traders, and thinkers spread across the stars, not with the force of armies, but with the unstoppable momentum of curiosity and stubborn hope? As Leah concluded her presentation and offered a small device containing Earth's proposals for trade, cultural exchange, and cooperation, Sorek found himself hesitating not because he doubted her sincerity, but because he feared the future her presence represented. Humanity had not come to fight a war. They had come to win something far more dangerous: the hearts and minds of the galaxy itself. When Leah was escorted back to her ship for the night, Sorek remained seated long after the chamber emptied, staring at the place where she had stood. His mind raced with possibilities, with threats and opportunities. He knew the Empire had a choice to make, and it was a choice that could not be taken lightly. Trusting the humans might lead to greatness, but underestimating them would almost certainly lead to ruin. Somewhere, deep in the ancient heart of Citadel Prime, the echoes of Lee Vance's footsteps lingered like the first tremors of a coming storm. The Empire had weathered countless threats before, but this time, Sorek sensed they were facing something different: not an enemy, but a force of nature, wrapped in human form, carrying a dream as vast and unstoppable as the galaxy itself. The Virelan Empire's high command had not slept in days. The arrival of the human ship had ignited an atmosphere of uncertainty in Citadel Prime, a place that had long prided itself on its control, its unchallenged strength. The most seasoned commanders, diplomats, and strategists gathered in secret meetings, scrutinizing the information they had about the human race, trying to fit it into a galaxy that had never once considered the possibility of human significance. Most of them, including the High Administrator Sorek, had initially dismissed the humans as a passing anomaly, nothing more than an unfortunate species from a dying world. But now, the undercurrent of dread was palpable. The human ship was still docked, its worn, sturdy frame almost mocking the pristine, advanced ships of the Empire. Every movement around the ship, no matter how subtle, was watched, analyzed, and reported. Sorix had given the order to monitor the human vessel and its crew at all times. What he didn't expect was the way it would start to quietly infiltrate their minds, like a slow-growing seed of doubt that no one had noticed until it had already taken root. The crew of the human ship had not done anything suspicious. In fact, they remained predictably mundane. They didn't try to hack into the Empire's systems. They didn't even appear particularly interested in anything beyond their assigned docking area. Yet, it was precisely that lack of aggression that was starting to unsettle the Varellans. A species that was expected to fight for every inch of space, to demand respect at the barrel of a weapon, was now offering simple gestures of peace, something so foreign, so uncalculated, that the Virulans didn't know how to respond. It was the calmness of it all that caused their paranoia to rise. Why weren't the humans behaving as the Empire expected? Why weren't they trying to strike, to provoke? What was it that the humans were planning that was so much worse than any military force they could muster? As the days passed, Sorix called for a full report on the human ship. He wanted to be prepared for any kind of trick, any kind of subterfuge. His engineers worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of the vessel's broken-down tech, trying to glean any kind of hidden weaponry or capability. Yet, every scan came up empty. The ship was old, creaky, and far from impressive. If anything, it looked like a relic of a time long past. Still, the nagging feeling that there was something more to it lingered. Meanwhile, Commander Leah Vance and her small crew had nothing to do but wait. They hadn't been given any instructions, and every passing hour in the cold, sterile environment of Citadel Prime seemed to pull them further into isolation. Leah had expected something, but not this. She had expected some sort of political maneuvering, perhaps even some kind of test of strength. Instead, she had been left alone to study the station, to look out the small, reinforced windows and observe the sprawling, high-tech facility that was the heart of an empire. The station's eerie silence felt like an alien world compared to Earth's vibrant chaos, but Leah's mind was constantly working. She had been sent here to explore and to negotiate, not to engage in idle waiting games. Despite the stillness around her, she had the unsettling feeling that the Virulans were watching her every move. She could feel it, the cold eyes of the Empire's finest, trained to scrutinize every detail. It wasn't paranoia. It was simply the way things were when a species as powerful as the Virulans was threatened by the unknown. As her thoughts drifted, a subtle buzz interrupted her reverie. It was a message. The Varellan Council had called for her presence in the main chamber. Leah straightened immediately. The silence of the room seemed to press in closer as she made her way through the complex halls toward the meeting chamber, her boots clicking against the metallic floors. She had been through tense negotiations before, but something in the air today felt different. This wasn't just an ordinary discussion. It felt like a turning point, like the edge of a knife that could go either way. Sorix and his council were already waiting for her. Their expressions were tight, their eyes cold and calculating. They sat in silence, their vast, alien forms towering over the human visitors. Leah stood before them, sensing the weight of every gaze upon her. Without preamble, Sorix began to speak. His voice was low and controlled, but Leah could hear the undertone of tension threading through each word. "Commander Vance," he began, "we've reviewed your ship, your history, your species. There is nothing remarkable about humanity in the traditional sense. Your technology is outdated. Your world is fragile. Yet, you came here unarmed, with nothing but your presence. What is it that you seek?" Leah felt the weight of his question. She had expected something like this. The Varellans were not simple beings, and their curiosity would always have a cost. She held his gaze, her voice steady and clear. "We seek knowledge, understanding, a chance to learn and grow together." The room seemed to freeze at her words. Sorix's claws tapped against the table as he regarded her with sharp, calculating eyes. "Understand this, Commander. The virulent empire has seen countless species rise and fall. We do not entertain weakness, and we do not tolerate threats." Leah's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. She had anticipated this line of questioning. The humans had survived by learning how to face threats head-on by using what little they had to outsmart, outlast, and adapt. "I'm not here to fight," she said calmly. I'm here to offer cooperation. The universe is vast, and humans are just beginning to explore it. We don't want to take anything from you. We want to build something that can outlast war, outlast conflict, outlast fear. There was a long, tense silence. Solrix seemed to be considering her words carefully, his eyes flicking between her and the reports that had been gathered about Earth. He wanted to believe her. His advisors, however, were more skeptical. One of them, a younger Varellan strategist, spoke up, his voice sharp. But they're not like us. Their technology, their tactics, they're unpredictable. And that's what makes them dangerous. Solrix raised a hand, silencing the room. I've seen many things. I've ruled for centuries. But I've learned one thing above all else: underestimating anyone, especially the unexpected, is the gravest mistake. His voice softened slightly as he turned back to Lee. You've proven that you're not here to destroy us, but we're still not sure what it is you truly want. Leah nodded, acknowledging the unspoken challenge. She had expected doubt, but now the weight of suspicion was turning into something else: respect, perhaps even a strange kind of fear. The humans were unpredictable, yes, but perhaps there was something even more dangerous about them: their refusal to be broken. She didn't need to convince them with words. She needed to show them. The humans had faced extinction on their homeworld. They had built themselves back up, using nothing but their willpower, creativity, and a deep, unshakable belief that they could survive. Now they were showing the galaxy that they had learned something important. Strength wasn't measured by how many ships you commanded, but by how many hearts and minds you could change. As Leah left the chamber, she felt a sense of victory, but it wasn't a victory anyone could see. It was the quiet knowledge that humanity had already won. They had forced the Varellans to rethink everything they believed. The humans weren't an anomaly. They were a force. A force that had come to stay. In the days that followed the intense meeting with Solrix, Commander Leah Vance found herself growing more and more aware of the shifting atmosphere around Citadel Prime. The Varellans were not the type of beings who showed their hand easily, and every encounter with them seemed to carry a quiet tension, a delicate thread that could snap at any moment. Their eyes, once curious, had grown guarded. The Empire's decision-makers watched Leah with more caution now. Every word she spoke was analyzed, every move scrutinized. She was an outsider, someone who had come from a world that had been forgotten by the rest of the galaxy, and yet here she was, standing on their doorstep with nothing more than a message of peace. The weeks passed in a haze of discussions, briefings, and endless debates. Leah spent most of her time in the small quarters provided to her by the Virulans, poring over data about their empire, their technology, their way of life. There was so much to learn, so much she hadn't anticipated. But even as she tried to understand them, she couldn't help but notice the way they watched her, always from a distance, always with uncertainty lingering in their gaze. It was clear now they were not ready to trust humanity. They hadn't even made a decision on whether to offer any real partnership. That uncertainty had its price. The silence was broken one afternoon when an unexpected message came through, a simple invitation from Solrix himself: meet me in the High Council chamber. Come alone. The message was direct, devoid of the usual formalities. Leah knew that the time had come. This wasn't another meeting to exchange pleasantries or explore possibilities. This was something else, something significant. She had no idea what to expect, but she didn't hesitate. If the Varellans were going to offer anything, it would be now. When she arrived at the council chamber, the atmosphere felt different. The usual tension was thick in the air, but this time, there was also something new: expectation. The chamber was more crowded than before, with more high-ranking officials seated around the vast table, their eyes fixed on the entrance. Solrix was already present, his eyes sharp as he watched her step into the room. He motioned for her to approach. "Commander Vance," he began, his voice steady but not without a hint of something deeper, something Lee couldn't quite place. "We've discussed your people, your intentions, and we've come to a conclusion." Leah's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. She had no idea what conclusion they had reached, but she knew it was going to be a turning point, one way or another. Solrix paused, his gaze sweeping over the council before returning to her. We have no interest in waging war with humanity. We don't need more enemies in a galaxy that already teems with conflict. But neither can we afford to take you at face value. What we need from you is a demonstration of your true capabilities. Lee felt a flicker of uncertainty. She had anticipated something along these lines, but hearing it spoken aloud still made her uneasy. "What do you mean by demonstration?" she asked, her voice firm but cautious. Sorix leaned forward slightly, his sharp eyes narrowing. "We have decided to make an offer, Commander. A test of sorts. We will provide you with a task, a challenge. If you succeed, we will offer you the partnership you seek. But if you fail—" His voice trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air like a threat. Leah's heart pounded. She understood what he was saying. This wasn't just about peace or cooperation anymore. It was about survival. The Varellans were offering a test, a dangerous game that could decide the fate of humanity's future. The stakes were higher than she'd imagined. Sorix continued, his tone unwavering. "Your task will be simple in concept, though not in execution. There's a system, uncharted, in a far-off region of space. It is a rich world, filled with resources we've had no interest in claiming until now. The species there are primitive, scattered across a collection of small planets. But there is something more, a rare substance, one that we've never encountered before. Its properties could be of great use to the Empire, but we don't wish to expend resources to retrieve it ourselves. We will allow you, Commander, to prove your worth by bringing us this substance. It is yours for the taking, but you must acquire it. If you succeed, you will gain our trust. If you fail—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. Failure wasn't an option. Leah's mind raced, processing the information. She had expected an offer of cooperation, perhaps even a diplomatic exchange, but this was something else entirely. The Virulons weren't offering peace so much as a test of humanity's worthiness. If they succeeded, they would be seen as equals, but if they failed, they would likely be crushed under the weight of the Empire's indifference. She looked around the table, noting the stone-cold expressions of the council members. None of them seemed to care about the potential consequences of failure. They were offering humanity an ultimatum, and it was up to her to decide how to respond. Sorix was watching her closely, as if studying her every reaction. He was waiting for her to make a decision, to show him whether humanity was capable of surviving in the galaxy, or whether it was just another fragile species destined to be swept aside. Leah didn't hesitate. The Virellans wanted a demonstration of strength. They wanted to see if humanity could face challenges head-on and come out victorious. And they would. She could feel the determination settling in her chest, solidifying her resolve. "We accept your offer," she said, her voice unwavering. "We will retrieve the substance, and we will prove that humanity is a force to be reckoned with." Sorix nodded, a faint hint of approval crossing his face. "Very well. You have 30 days to complete the task. You will be provided with a ship, a small crew, and the coordinates. After that, it will be up to you." Leah felt a rush of adrenaline, but it was mixed with a sense of foreboding. This was no ordinary mission. The Virellans weren't simply testing their ability to succeed, they were testing whether humanity had the strength to endure. She turned and left the council chamber, her thoughts already racing ahead to the task at hand. The next 30 days would define humanity's place in the galaxy. There was no turning back now. As Leah made her way back to her quarters, the weight of the offer settled upon her. The Varellans had given humanity a chance and opportunity to prove themselves. But as she stared out into the endless expanse of space, she knew this was more than just a test. It was the beginning of something far larger than anyone could anticipate. The galaxy had been watching, and now humanity was stepping into the light. The real challenge had just begun. The hum of the ship was the only sound that filled the darkened control room. Commander Lee Vance stood in front of the large window, staring out into the black void of space, her mind racing with the weight of what was ahead. The Virellans had given humanity an opportunity, but it wasn't one that could be taken lightly. They had been tasked with retrieving a mysterious substance from a far-off system, a system unknown to the Virellans and untapped by any other species. It was a mission of great importance, not just for the Virelans, but for the future of humanity. If they succeeded, humanity could gain a place at the table with the galaxy's most powerful empires. If they failed, the consequences would be dire. The pressure was immense. Leah knew the stakes, but what worried her more was the sense of isolation that had begun to settle over her crew. They were all strangers in a strange land, surrounded by forces they didn't fully understand. The ship, an old but reliable vessel the Virelans had provided, was cramped and worn, a far cry from the sleek, advanced warships the Empire used. Still, it was enough for their mission. It was enough to get them to the unknown system, but no one knew what awaited them once they arrived. Leah turned from the window and addressed her crew, gathered in the ship's briefing room. There were only a handful of them, engineers, navigators, and soldiers, but every one of them had a crucial role to play. "We have a job to do, and we're going to do it well. The Virulens are watching us, and failure is not an option," she said, her voice steady but firm. "We don't know what we'll face when we get to the system, but I know we can handle it. This mission is our chance to show the galaxy what humanity can do." Her words were meant to inspire, to rally them, but as she spoke, she saw the same uncertainty in their eyes that she felt in her chest. The unknown was a powerful force, and the fear of failure weighed heavily on everyone aboard. The crew nodded in silence, understanding the gravity of what was at stake. The ship's engines hummed, and the stars outside blurred as they jumped into warp speed. The journey was long, but it gave Lee time to think. The silence in the ship was often interrupted by the quiet hum of machinery and the soft chatter of her crew, but for the most part, it felt like they were moving through a void, both literally and figuratively. They were heading into a region of space where no one had ever ventured, and the task at hand seemed almost too large to comprehend. What was this substance that the Virelans were so eager to obtain? What could it possibly be that had them so desperate to have it, yet unwilling to retrieve it themselves? As the days passed, the sense of dread only grew. Leah found herself walking the corridors late at night, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness of the ship. The stillness was both peaceful and unsettling. Her thoughts kept circling back to the mission, to the task they had been given, but also to the question that lingered at the back of her mind: what did the Virelans truly want from humanity? They had been cryptic in their discussions. Their words were measured, but Leah had seen through the veil. There was something they weren't telling her. She knew it was a risk, but her curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to investigate the ship's systems herself. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was more to this mission than what they had been told. As she accessed the ship's main computer, a sense of unease crept over her. The data they had been given on the system they were headed toward was sparse, almost too sparse. There were coordinates, but little information on the planets within the system. The substance they were supposed to retrieve was barely mentioned, as if it were a footnote in a much larger story. Lee leaned forward, scanning the data, her eyes darting across the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then it hit her. The planets in the system were not as uninhabited as they had been led to believe. They had been marked on old star maps, forgotten and overlooked, but there were signs, subtle ones, that indicated previous exploration. Leah's heart skipped a beat. Could the Virelans have known more about this system than they were letting on? She couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain: something wasn't right. The next few hours were a blur. The crew continued to go through the motions of the journey, preparing for the task ahead. But Leah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being used, that the Virelans had something much larger in mind. She knew that she needed to tell someone, but who could she trust? Everyone was on edge, and revealing her suspicions now might cause panic. The ship continued its long journey toward the coordinates, and Leah's anxiety mounted. It wasn't just the unknown system that terrified her now, it was the realization that humanity's fate might already be sealed. They were walking into something that they couldn't control, and it was starting to feel like a trap. Finally, the day arrived. The ship dropped out of warp speed, and the view outside the window shifted. The star system they had arrived at was eerily quiet. There were no signs of life, no ships, no active signals. Just dead space. But the planets were there, suspended in the void like forgotten relics. The first planet they approached was barren, rocky, dry, and without atmosphere. It didn't seem to hold any clues about the mysterious substance they were supposed to retrieve. As they moved closer, Leah's unease deepened. The surface was littered with strange angular structures, ruins of an ancient civilization long gone. What had happened here? She couldn't help but wonder if the substance they were looking for was tied to these ruins. The Virulens hadn't said anything about ancient civilizations, but Leah felt that the pieces were beginning to fall into place. Was this substance connected to something far older than anyone had anticipated? And why had the Virulens sent them here? "Prepare to land," Leah ordered, her voice tight with tension. She had no answers, only questions, but they had no choice but to proceed. The crew worked quickly to prepare for the landing. The ship descended into the atmosphere of the planet, the strange ruins growing larger with every passing second. The world outside the window seemed to pulse with a strange energy, an energy that neither Leah nor her crew could quite explain. As the ship touched down on the dusty ground, Leah's pulse raced. They were here, in the heart of the unknown. The mission had begun. They were about to discover something that could change the course of humanity's future forever. But what was it? And why had the Virulens chosen them to be the ones to uncover it? The answers were just beyond their reach, waiting to be revealed. And as Leah and her crew prepared to step off the ship and into the mystery of the planet's surface, they had no idea that their journey was about to take a turn they never could have imagined.